So to help us through and understand this minefield of risks and opportunities in the world of natural resources is Shirley Webber. Shirley Webber is the head of coverage for resources at Absa Corporate and Investment Bank. Before we go into some of the great opportunities and advantages and exciting things that are happening, the mineral resources industry, the mining industry, is desperately concerned about this mining charter, considerably better than Mosebenzi Zwane's catastrophe, but still some quite big stumbling blocks. So we're not seeing the promised jump up in investment that we were hoping to see by now.
I do think the mining charter is definitely better than what we've had in the past. I think all the consultations that happened, with industry and with the chamber obviously helped as well. I think one big aspect, like once empowered, always empowered aspect, was very important for the mining companies. Because there was no initial control, after you've done empowerment, what happens thereafter, with the actual shareholding. So for us, that was an important point that stuck. I do think it's all fair for mining entities, to go to a 30% as soon as there's changes, for example, in licensings and mining rights, etc., with either a sale or, with changing shareholdings and things. So for us, that was all good. I do think, acceptance will only come with time. But one other positive aspect for us were definitely, looking at, more the local content, ensuring that communities are looked after, within the mining sphere.
So what is the mining sector so concerned about? Because the Mineral Resources Council is taking this charter on review, and it says that it's got a whole bunch of stumbling blocks in it, which makes South Africa uninvestable from a mining perspective.
I think, if you look at a mining charter and thinking that it's uninvestable, for lack of a better word, I don't necessarily think that's the case. Every investor is looking at a stable environment, political stability. That's what we need, for example, in South Africa and actually for the rest of the African continent as well. And for me, we've seen a lot of other African countries are being a bit silly when it comes to legislation and taxes and tax bills being put through. And I can honestly say in South Africa we haven't had that senseless, for example, motivations coming through.
Not in the last year to 18 months anyway.
Before that, I mean, hindsight's best science, clearly, but for us, we've seen it as positive from an Absa point of view. I think every transaction will be measured, on its merit, as and when changes come, that could impact, from the mining charter rules, etc. But for us, South Africa should be an investing country.
This is an economy built on the backs of mining. I mean, it's an economy that flourished off the back of mining, even in the hardest of the sanctions years. Mining has been the core of this economy. It's becoming a smaller and smaller part of this economy. Can it ever rise to a point of dominance again, to be 10% of the economy again?
I think if you look at the various commodities, Bruce, it becomes a different scenario. If you look at where we are, for example, with gold, we know gold is becoming marginal, and not because it's bad gold companies we have in South Africa. It's actually the deeper you have to go into the earth to obtain the ore, that becomes the problem, and that's why it's marginal. So the gold that's still here, it's all good gold per ton, grams per ton that we're getting out. The reality is it's just the infrastructure in order to get it out becomes more expensive, and that is an issue. So that's why efficiencies are more important. And I do believe that's why many of the mining entities they're diversifying into other commodities to make sure that that's a nice mix.
I mean, Ghana has always been at the core of the gold mining industry. I mean, if you go back centuries, there's evidence that gold mining activity has been happening there for millennia, almost for a millennia. Iron ore production has happened all over this continent for millennia too. There's plenty of geological evidence to support that. What legs has the African mining industry got? What sort of resources are under the crust of Africa?
Look, I think the usual suspect commodities are obviously there. The gold, the platinum, the iron ore, the diamonds, everything is there. Everyone is looking at the newer, renewable type of commodities coming out, but that's actually very difficult. It's situated in countries where the political environments are not stable. If you're looking at a lithium mine, for example, lithium by itself can have 28 categories of types of lithium, and how do you actually manage those type of things? So, I think the newer commodities will take a while to actually come off the ground. So the bulk, I think, of investment will still happen, with the traditional commodities that we have out.
Talk to me about our gas reserves. There's a wonderfully named Brulpadda, which is a lovely name for a gas reserve which has been found south of Mossel Bay. Moss gas has been at Mossel Bay for a long time. It's ugly, distillation plants, factories, refinery, that's the word I was looking for, is on the main road, on the garden route. But Moss gas hasn't been particularly successful. Do we have a great gas reserve at Brulpadda? Is it the first of many to come? Give me a sense of it.
If you look at the West Coast, that's where we originally got, for example, all our supply into the refinery, gas, etc. So that's where we got our supply from. The actual field was clearly running out of gas, etc. That's why it's needed for us to obtain, obviously, new reserves, etc. The Brulpadda one is definitely a big find by Total. The reality is it will take a while for it to manifest into gas flowing because it takes a lot of time. I think what we've seen at the whole of Africa, especially on the east coast of the Mozambican coast, there's a lot of activity there. There's active fields there. There's fields that's producing. There's a lot of fields that will produce soon in the next 4 years. And ultimately, we all have to be reliant, for example, in the future on gas for power, and that becomes a whole different discussion. So we're very excited on the east coast of Mozambique. We're very excited on that. We think the west coast of South Africa specifically, it will take a bit longer, to get to the forefront. But it's there.
Well, it's there, but it's pointless if it's there and we can't extract it safely and remove it efficiently and bring it to land. And that's one of the big risks. I mean, you've only got to go to Bredasdorp, to the Shipwreck Museum, to realize just how tempestuous the oceans are along there. And suddenly you've got to have massive expense in construction in order to tap the gas from the field, which is 150, 200 kilometers offshore, and bring it to bring it in. Let's get slightly contentious and talk about fracking. Let's talk about the Karoo. I mean, we don't have a provable resource there. We have geology which suggests that there is a potential for a great gas reserve, but we've kind of put the brakes on as a country in terms of the potential exploitation of that.
The reality is fracking is absolutely positive. There's not water. And in order to do fracking properly, you need proper, sources of water, and that's the actual problem.
Because you've got to force water into the earth, crack the earth up to release the gas.
And that's exactly what should be happening. If you don't have water, that becomes a big problem. Even to put pipelines down to facilitate that becomes an enormous aspect. And then it becomes, what do you do with the environment? Then it doesn't become farmland anymore, etc. So fracking has been done very successfully in many parts of the world, but then there's access to water, and we know it's nature that we want to protect there as well.
Shirley Webber, thank you very much indeed. Shirley Webber is the head of coverage for natural resources at Absa Corporate and Investment Bank, bringing an end to this series of Absa Insights. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.